There is a food crop growing wild across the eastern half of this country that carries 3 times the protein of a potato, feeds the soil instead of stripping it, and can be dug in any month of the year, including January. You cannot buy it in a single American grocery store. It is not rare. It fed this continent for thousands of years, and the Department of Agriculture measured exactly how good it is in 1938. Then it went quiet, and the reason has nothing to do with the plant. The first clue is the shape of it. On the shore of a pond in Concord, Massachusetts, a man digging for fishing worms pulled up something that stopped him. Not a root, a string, a slender underground cord with swollen knobs spaced along it like beads on a necklace. That man was Henry David Thoreau, and he had eaten these as a boy. He had half convinced himself he dreamed them. He was holding one of the oldest food crops on this continent, and he already knew it was going. The Lenape called it hopniss. That is the older name, and the better one. In 1585, on the Carolina coast, the English scientist Thomas Harriot wrote down a root the local people called openauk, growing many together, one beside another, as though they were fastened on a string. In 1749, the Swedish botanist Peter Kalm traveled the British colonies and recorded that the Indians boiled these roots and ate them instead of bread. Instead of bread. That is the tell. This was never a wild snack for hard times. It was the staple. Tribes across the eastern half of the continent moved tubers out of the swamps and planted them near their settlements, in stands that produced for decades without being replanted. Botanists can still trace the outline of old encampments today by looking for dense colonies of hopniss vine, which is why the Wampanoag knew exactly where to dig in the winter of 1620. The Pilgrims came ashore at Plymouth with English seed, English tools, and an English calendar, and every one of those was wrong for the ground they landed on. Their grain failed. What carried them through that first winter, and through the 2 hard winters after it, was not corn. It was a basket of knobby tubers that the Wampanoag showed them how to dig out of frozen mud and roast in the ashes. Those tubers are the same ones Thoreau would pull out of the mud 2 centuries later. Hopniss. Openauk. Today we call it groundnut. Apios americana. Welcome to nature's lost vault. You would think that winter would have earned the plant a permanent place in American agriculture. Instead, within a generation, town after town in New England passed ordinances making it illegal for native people to dig groundnut on land the English now claimed. Those ordinances are in the agricultural record. The people who taught the colonists to survive were locked out of the food that did the saving, by law, on their own ground. So what was worth writing a law over? In 1938, 2 chemists at the United States Department of Agriculture, Elias Yanofsky and Robert Kingsbury, ran the analysis. Groundnut tubers came back at 13 to 17% crude protein by dry weight. That is the highest of any common root crop on Earth, and it has held up in every study since. The tubers also carry roughly 10 times the calcium of a potato and twice the iron, with a balanced amino acid profile. About a third of the fresh tuber is starch, so it cooks like a potato and it feeds like a bean, which no potato has ever managed to do. And the tubers are only half the harvest. The vine throws clusters of dark maroon flowers in midsummer that smell faintly of violets, and by September those turn into pods. The seeds inside cook up like peas. Then there is the part that matters most to anyone who has priced fertilizer lately. Groundnut is a legume. It pulls nitrogen straight out of the air and fixes it into the ground through bacteria living on its roots. You are not feeding this crop. It is quietly feeding the dirt it stands in. Highest protein of any root crop. Free nitrogen. Harvestable year-round. Plant it once and it comes back on its own. So how does a crop like that disappear from an entire country? It did not get banned. It got outrun. In the second half of the 1800s, American food stopped being local and turned into freight. Rail lines stitched the country together, and suddenly a crop was not judged by how well it fed a family. It was judged by whether it could survive the system. Could it be graded to a uniform size, lifted by machine, held in a warehouse for 6 months, and settled up in one clean accounting year? Groundnut fails all 4. The tubers sit at uneven depths along a wandering underground runner, in sizes from a fingernail to a fist, so no machine could ever lift them. They need 2 full seasons to size up, which no annual ledger tolerates. And a crop that replants itself is a crop nobody gets to sell you twice. The potato passed all 4. In 1872, a young horticulturist named Luther Burbank found a rare seed ball on a potato plant on a rented farm in Lunenburg, Massachusetts. He grew out 23 seeds, and one of the seedlings was extraordinary. Smooth, uniform, heavy-yielding, blight-resistant. He asked $500 for the rights. In 1875, the James J. H. Gregory Seed Company paid him $150 and took them. Burbank took the money and moved to California. The seed company took the potato and sold it to farmers every spring, to farmers who would need to buy it again the following spring, and then again the spring after that. A russet-skinned mutation of that same variety became the russet Burbank, still the most widely planted potato in North America, and the potato inside almost every fast food fry sold in this country. That is the entire story in 2 sentences. One crop earned a seed dealer money every single year. The other one only ever asked to be planted once. Which brings us back to Thoreau, and to a detail in his journal that is almost too perfect. In October of 1852, he wrote about digging groundnuts at the edge of a meadow out of a railroad sandbank. The railroad. He is pulling the old crop out of the raw embankment of the machine that is replacing it, roasting them for supper, and he never once remarks on the irony. 2 years later, in Walden, he set down the sentence. Cultivation has well nigh exterminated it. Then he added something stranger. If wild nature ever reigned here again, he wrote, the tender English grains would fall to 1,000 enemies, and this humble root would revive and resume its ancient importance. Nobody took him up on that for another 130 years. Then, in 1985, at the Louisiana Agricultural Experiment Station in Baton Rouge, 2 scientists named William Blackman and Berthel Reynolds decided to find out what this plant could actually do if somebody bothered to breed it properly. They pulled more than 200 wild lines out of the eastern United States and Canada and crossed them. Over 9 years, they produced more than 2,200 hybrids and kept 53 elite selections. They pushed yields to several times what wild stands give, with tubers that were larger, rounder, and clustered tight to the crown instead of scattered down a long runner. In under a decade, they did the domestication work that 400 years of American farming had never gotten around to. Then Blackman retired, and the program simply stopped. No scandal, no ban, no pressure from anyone. The funding ran out and the field books closed. The living collection only survived because other researchers refused to let it die, and the largest holding of improved groundnut in the world now sits at Iowa State University under a geneticist named Stephen Cannon, who sequenced the plant and published the results in scientific reports in 2016. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Pacific, Japanese farmers have been growing this American native as a commercial vegetable for over a century. They call it hodoaimo. You can buy it in a market in Tokyo. You still cannot buy it in Ohio. Groundnut is hardy from Zone 3 to Zone 10, covering nearly every state east of the Rockies. Set tubers 2 to 3 inches deep in moist, sunny ground this fall, give the vines something to climb, and then leave them alone. After 1 season, you will have tubers the size of a walnut. After 2, you will be pulling up whole strands of them, and from that point you can dig any month the ground is not frozen. They sweeten after a hard frost, the way parsnips do, and they keep for months in a cool cellar without sprouting or going soft. Always cook them. Never eat them raw, because heat breaks down the protease inhibitors in the raw tuber. Thoreau got 1/2 of it right and 1/2 wrong. He was right that cultivation nearly finished this plant off. He was wrong that it would take wild nature to bring it back. It takes a shovel, a damp corner of a yard, and one person patient enough to wait 2 years for a crop that then keeps its own promise. If this vault opened something for you, subscribe to Nature's Lost Vault. The next vault opens soon.